What's going on? Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome to my channel. This video is aimed squarely. I've got the beginners in my crosshairs because this is for you guys. Starting composing is daunting. It's terrifying. You're on forums, you're on Reddit, you're on blogs. You're asking, what do I need to get started? Blah, blah, blah. This is for you guys. I'm going to talk about the three P. This is the cool way to do three, by the way. People do this or sometimes this. This is the cool way. It's not the cool way. 3 pieces of kit, okay, that you need to get started. Hardware, not software. I can cover that in a different video if people want. Even if you're not a beginner, if you're going to upgrade your kit, you know, this might be helpful to you too. I've been doing this long enough. I have gone from this to that to the other thing hardware-wise, and so I kind of know what I'm talking about. Also, this video is going to be backed up by a Sound on Sound series, which is all about composing. It's excellent. So I'm going to abstract some of those things that are said in that article. So I'm adding my own twist. Here we go. Number 1, you will need a digital audio workstation, a DAW, as some people call them. Cakewalk makes Sonar. Ableton makes Ableton Live. You've got Apple doing Logic. You've got Steinberg doing Cubase. You've got Nuendo. You've got Digital Performer. You've got a whole bunch of different options, cheap options like Reaper, newcomers like Bitwig and Studio One. You want to know what the good news is? Most of these modern digital audio workstations, especially the Studio One and the Reaper and all that stuff, all these guys can do music to picture pretty well. I started off using Ableton. Daniel James, a friend of mine, who I can now say is a friend of mine because we've chatted on Facebook Messenger. We really hit it off on Facebook Messenger. He started off using Ableton. I started off using Ableton. I have migrated now to Logic. Bottom line is you're going to need one of these digital audio workstations. So what is best? I'm not here to tell you what is best because everyone is different. Everyone has their own path. Digital audio workstations are subjective and personal. The company I work for, we like to make jokes about how like some people who are more punky are more geared to this workstation. Some people who are more like left-brained are geared to that one. You're like, what digital audio workstation is like you? Anyway, but I will tell you this. The 2 most popular DAWs that I see coming up over and over and over, I'll just be honest, and this is from interviewing, you know, the guy who scored Pete's Dragon, the Disney reboot version, meeting people in the field or whatever, the 2 that come up the most, Cubase and Logic. Now, for people who don't know these terms, these names, these digital audio workstations, these companies, Cubase is by Steinberg. It is compatible with Mac and PCs. Logic is Apple only, so you will need a Mac, either a MacBook Pro, a MacBook Air, a Mac Pro, something Apple related. I don't know if there's an iPad version. I believe it's only GarageBand that's on iPad. And if you want tips on composing with GarageBand, you should check out the guy who runs the GarageBand guide. He's Scottish. He's terrific. He's terrific. Great guy. Logic and Cubase continue coming up, but honorable mentions, Digital Performer, although I feel like Digital Performer is kind of, it's a very complex customizable digital audio workstation, but it has a steep learning curve. But that being said, a lot of people think that Ableton has a steep learning curve, and I don't. It was my first workstation. I still use it, but some people say that about Digital Performer. There's other stuff out there. Again, Reaper, super custom. If you're a hacker, like if you like, you know, C++, MS-DOS, I don't know what I'm talking about. Reaper's great because you can customize all kinds of shortcuts and stuff like that. The world is your oyster. The audio world is your oyster. There's so many choices out there, but you are going to need a digital audio workstation, and the 2 that I keep seeing coming up, Logic and Cubase. So take it or leave it, but you're going to need one. The next thing you're going to need in the computer realm is a computer. You're going to need a DAW. That's number 1. And then you're going to need to put that DAW on a computer of some kind. The computer is today's modern studio. It's just the way it is. You have a computer, you have a MacBook, whatever, you have a studio. Congratulations. Look for a 64-bit operating system. We're not 32-bit anymore. You want 64-bit. The next thing you want to think about is the processor. And nowadays, the baseline, the starting point, is Intel Core 2 Duo processor. 2.1 gigahertz is considered the bare minimum sort of requirement as far as speed is concerned, but you could also look to a Core i5 or i7 processor. These are sort of the directions you should go for. As far as random access memory is concerned, RAM, 4 gigabytes is good, 8 gigabytes is even better, 16 gigabytes is even better. It'll ensure a very smooth sort of ride. You always want to make sure that whenever you buy a computer for composing or any sort of audio or video related work, you always buy more than you need, because chances are, if you're good at what you do and you really love doing it, you're going to want something with a bit more horsepower and a bit more space. So by buying up, I find that gives you the room to grow and to become a bit more nerdy and sort of tunnel vision into your work and download more libraries and all that stuff. So try and sort of think of your computer, if anything, not the workstation, not the DAW or whatever, but your computer as the investment that you grow with. The next thing I want to say is sample libraries, especially those from Spitfire, Orchestral Tools. I mean, Berlin Brass is like around half a terabyte. You are going to need space. And what I would recommend you do, if you saw I had a video on hard drives or whatever, you're going to need a hard drive. I'd recommend that you keep all the samples and stuff on an external hard drive. I go for an SSD. It's super quiet. In fact, it doesn't make any noise. It has the same sort of architecture as a USB stick, so it's very quiet. Go for an external hard drive for the samples themselves. So what I mean by this is you download, say, Native Instruments, a Contact instrument, all the samples and stuff. You can you can put them somewhere else, and then have the application say, just like let's say we're talking about I don't know, Action Strikes or whatever. The application will live on your hard drive. I think it has to be there, but the samples, your computer will look for them on an external drive. And this way it keeps your main drive that's on your Mac or MacBook Pro or PC or whatever pretty nimble and light, and you can add more stuff. And I think that a more nimble, less sort of filled up with stuff data-wise main hard drive makes for a much smoother computer when you start it up and everything else. I'm not a computer guy, so don't quote me on that, but you're going to need storage. And I mean, if you get into this game, Native Instruments, Spitfire, Orchestral Tools, Heaviosity, there's so many people making libraries. You're going to want them all. You're going to have gas. I have gas. By gas, I mean gear acquisition syndrome. That's what that stands for. You're going to want everything. So you want to make sure, kind of like I said with the computer thing, you get more than you need. RAM-wise, processing power, all that stuff. Same goes for storage. So all that to say, if you are going to go for a drive, make sure that you have, an external drive, if you're going to go for something that isn't solid state, that's more of like you've got your sort of disk spinning and all that, the platter, look for a speed of 7,200 revolutions per minute. That should be the baseline. That's where you start from. Don't go to 5,400, 7,200. You've got USB, Thunderbolt. Now there's USB-C. Firewire is kind of on the wane. It's not really being supported anymore. That being said, there's a lot of Firewire to Thunderbolt. I think Firewire to USB 3 attachments out there. So if you do buy a Firewire external drive, you can still sort of maintain data going from your computer to the drive that way. But look for drives that are USB 3, solid state. If you can't go solid state again, go for a 7,200 revolutions per minute external drive. And it's funny because I'm saying all this now, and like in 6 months, this video might be obsolete because technology moves that quickly, but hopefully it's helpful in some way. The third and final thing you're going to need some sort of MIDI instrument. Now, don't let anyone kind of fool you into thinking that you need a MIDI keyboard, either the 49, 61, or 88 variety. I think there's an even smaller one. Native Instruments does the Complete Control series, which has, I think, variations. I'm probably going to do a quick cut here while I go and check to see what they have. Native Instruments has a 25, 49, I believe it's 25, hope it's 25, 49, 61, and 88 Complete Control series. The reason you might want something like that is because it sort of pairs and mirrors well with your mapping. So when you have effects or velocity dynamics, glissando, whatever, things are mapped instantly, especially in the Native Instruments world. A lot of other companies now are using the NKS format, which means that if you have a Complete Control series keyboard and you buy an NKS compatible library, you're going to see things mapping onto your MIDI faders and all that stuff, and you're able to do reverb and all that stuff without having to take your mouse and go find the reverb thing. It's probably already mapped to the keyboard. So that, from a workflow perspective, makes a lot of sense, but those keyboards are really expensive. So other companies that I would think of would be Novation. Nectar's really good. Nectar's kind of like surprising me a little bit. They have some really good offerings out there. So Nectar with a K, Nektar, Nectar. M Audio is another good one. Novation, I think I mentioned. Complete Control. You have your sort of higher up keyboards. with like sort of real weighted keys and all that stuff. Spitfire use them in their videos and stuff like that. I would sort of say if you're just starting out, again, Novation, M Audio, Nectar, Korg might make a couple that are pretty good. Just start with something that sort of gets you where you need to go and can fit in your space, and think of something that I would go for a fully weighted or a semi-weighted if you can't avoid synth action. Synth action is just like you press the key and your finger goes right through it like, butter or something. Try and go for something that kind of emulates a piano feel. This might sort of help you write your cues a bit more, I don't know, this is weird, but like authentically. It might just be a bit more real when you're putting your fingers down. You don't feel like you're playing like this Mickey Mouse sort of plastic toy. Obviously, if you're going for 49 or if you're going for 25 or 61, you've got those transpose buttons where you can go up and down an octave. I think a really great score can be written on a 61 key MIDI keyboard. You don't have to go to 88. Have your girlfriend come in, she's got to walk around your 88 key keyboard or whatever. I think you can get a lot done on 49 and 61. 25 I think is sort of cutting it close. To me, that's more maybe like a DJ tool or something. I don't think the idea of hitting transpose back and forth as you're trying to play because you have to go up the octave or whatever, that's not very efficient for your workflow, so I try and stay away from that. The other thing I want to say is it doesn't have to be a keyboard. That's what I was saying at the beginning of this section. It doesn't have to be a keyboard. For example, I can't really pull it out here because this is PG. No, I can't pull out my push. I started composing films in push. I did like maybe 5 or 6 short films completely with a push controller, 64 touch sensitive little pads and everything like that. It's a very capable machine. So if you're coming from Novation Launchpad or a push or something, or I guess a Novation Launch Key or whatever, do your work on the MIDI controller that allows you to be the most creative. Don't feel you have to go to a keyboard. That being said, I think when you're kind of graduating to more complex sample libraries and more complex arrangements and all that stuff, you might want something where you can sort of spread out for the workflow, so you're not like cramping your hands and doing this. And so I would say go for the instrument that makes the most sense to you, and eventually you might find yourself graduating from a Novation Launch Key or a push to something like a keyboard. And the good news is, if you're a composer now, the choices for your MIDI controller, it's endless. There's so many companies making these things. You can get them on Craigslist or Kijiji for super cheap. There's so much range, and the functionality is awesome. And again, Nectar is one of those companies where I saw their stuff and I'm like, that looks really good. And the reason I'm like, that looks really good is because they have this one series that has this great section of faders. These guys right here. These guys, to me, are awesome when you're doing automation. So you would sign like dynamics would be this, vibrato would be this, maybe another release maybe would be that or whatever, and you just put a piece of tape down and you remind yourself that those mean those things. And for me, pulling up and down a fader like this with a nice medium to long throw, which is like the distance between the top and the bottom from 0 to 127 sort of CC messages, this is really good, as opposed to using like an encoder. Like, it's kind of cutting my hair in the mirror. Like, the opposite move is anyway. So I don't really like these for when I'm trying to do automation. It all looks like I'm tweaking my nipples here, huh? Also, you got the mod wheels. These are standard, the mod and the pitch wheel, standard on many MIDI keyboards. So you want something that's going to enable you, I'm just going to put this here, not awkwardly at all. You have to get something that sort of allows you to be creative and to feel kind of inspired by, you want to walk in, and a semi-weighted or fully weighted keyboard just makes you feel like you're composing, and it's also emulating the way that a real piano feels. But your push, your Novation, your push, your Novation, that'll do the trick too. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about sample libraries. So once you figured out once you figured out the hardware side of it, and you've got your RAM, your processor, you've got your digital audio workstation, you've got your keyboard, we're going to talk about sample libraries, where to get started, especially with strings, because there's just so many. So anyway, I'm going to give this guy a bath, tuck him in, and thanks for watching.